Hello, my darlings. So, welcome to another Saturday with Gail live. It is a happy book birthday to me. Yay! This book is birthing today. There it is. The pretty. So, I think I am maybe a little early. I have a clock here which tells me what time it is so I don't go over. But I also have an iPad here which says a different time. So, it's just the way it is. So, hello. Welcome to Alive. We're talking about the fifth gender today, and I am going to read you a little bit from it. This will give you a chance, I guess, to hear what the words sound like to me in my head. I normally don't do readings. For those of you who have come and seen me at a convention or anything, it's just not something I opt in for or sign up for. Mostly because many of my books are in British English, and as you can tell, I'm American, or at least I was raised here. And so I'm not really comfortable doing a British accent. So, yeah. But this book is science fiction, so the accent is kind of irrelevant. And all you need to do is watch a Star Wars movie to know how irrelevant accents are in the future, as it turns out. So, hello everybody. Oh yay, Dick is tuned in. Dick, will you share over to the Parasol Protectorate group, please? So it was the group, incidentally, for those of you who don't know, there's a fan group called the Parasol Protectorate group, and that group voted to have me read. So what I was going to do was talk a little bit about the independent publishing process, because the last live I did, we talked about the traditional publishing process. But I think I'm going to leave that for another time. One of the reasons I'm going to leave it for another time is I like to have all of my books around me for visual aid when I'm doing one of those, like, this is how publishing works conversations. And I'm not in my office today. I'm actually at home, hence the wall stencil. That's how you can tell. It's pouring with rain, or it was, and my office is in a really old Victorian, and the windows like rattle and clatter really, really loudly when it's raining and storming. So I figured it would be better for you in sound quality if I did it here at home. So hello everyone tuning in. This is awesome. Please leave a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from if you're comfortable doing that, because I love knowing that these videos go out and reach all around the world. It just makes me really happy. That's why I do this, because I can't fly to and be everywhere. So I have to instead do this for you, do live videos. So we're going to start shortly with a little bit of a reading. I'm not going to do a very long one, probably just the first scene or so, which you can also check out on my blog. I posted it yesterday, the very first scene of the new book. So I'll start with a reading, and then we'll go straight into a Q&A at that juncture. So if you could save your questions for when I finish the reading. I might talk a little bit about the book at that point, and then we'll do Q&A. And we can try to maybe keep the questions to science fiction and this universe and how I came to develop it and stuff. But as always, if you have a burning question about anything else, I'm always happy to answer that in the live, or at least tell you why I won't answer it in the video. So, I'm gonna drink a little bit because this is a book birthday for me, so I'm celebrating. This is a dry Riesling with a little bit of a fizz to it. It's actually not too dry. It's kind of, Pinot Grigio level. This is the booze, in case you care and would like to join me. Yeah, if you want to leave a comment letting me know what you're drinking, then that's also fun. If you're drinking on a Saturday afternoon, or Sunday if you're tuning in from down under. Or if you're drinking tea. Normally I would be drinking tea, but I just finished my tea and I'm moving on to my version of champagne. So, Kevin's like, good, I'm not alone. No, you're not alone. Or maybe you're responding to someone else in a part of the world. I never know. The comments kind of happen. I do always go back and read all the comments, whether you leave them in Facebook or on YouTube. I always go read your comments, just so you know. You're not commenting into the abyss. I do like Rieslings. I find the Rieslings in the United States and the attitude in the US towards Riesling, they tend to be too sweet for me. But actually in Germany, Rieslings come in quite a variety, and I like a dry Riesling. Book's having a Diet Coke to be traditional. Ooh, a sparkling rosé, very classy. And some sparkling water. Excellent. Everybody's joining me with bubbles. Bubbles are good. Right. So now that we're all settled in, why don't we start with the reading? So I am Gail Carriger. When I write these books, I am G.L. Carriger, and I am going to be reading you the beginning of my latest book, which is called The Fifth Gender. And it is a Tinkered Stars mystery. Here we go. The first chapter. What's with the pet thing, anyway? There's no doubt about it. Humans are weird. Surely all the other aliens would agree with Tristol on the subject, especially at the pub, which was run by humans, on the space station, also run by humans. But humans could be efficient in their weirdness, and often quite fun. And no one argued with the fact that they were awfully prolific in all things, breeding faster than any other spacefaring species ever encountered in the charted galaxy. They spread, like fungus. They also spread their legs, a lot. They were cute, though. Tristol admitted that. Fertile, sexy, brown-toned creatures, humans, with those adorable little round ears and petal-shaped eyes. But they were also weird. Take the whole keeping of pets thing. Who would have dreamed up such an eccentricity? Keep an animal in one's abode, intended for neither work nor food, just companionship. Very weird. Tristol, however, was a Galloy, the notorious easygoing Loggia variant, too, which meant that once he met one of these so-called pets, he was rather taken with the concept. Or at least this particular sample thereof. Cat-neuter pet Mr. Montiguous was currently under Tristol's care, and Tristol was utterly enamored of the funny, hairy, four-footed beastie. To have charge of a cat, particularly this cat, was a truly sacred responsibility. Mr. Montiguous's humans were away on their second honeymoon. Tris had been chosen to feed the cat, and to pet the cat, and to call the cat a wonderful feline creature. Tristol had no idea what a second honeymoon meant. To start with, the word honeymoon was mysterious. What did the excrement of bees and the satellite astral body have to do with spousal contracts? And then, why did one need two of them? Human female friend Ellie spoke eloquently about wanting to sit on sand and drink fruity drinks with umbrellas in them for her second honeymoon. Tristol's hair quivered in confusion. Why sand? Would not sand get into certain intimate places? Most uncomfortable. Then, after looking up the word umbrella, because it was new to him, there being no weather on a space station, Tris was also left wondering, why stick a large accessory meant for rain into one's drink? Would not this damage both the accessory and the drink? Seemed a soggy bit of business. But Ellie and human male friend Olav, Ellie's spousal contract, were excited about the whole endeavor. Since Tris spent most of his life excited about something, he was always delighted to facilitate the sensation in others, so he sent his human heterosexual spousal unit friends off on their weird, soggy, sandy honeymoon thingy, and undertook the task of looking after their cat. Mr. Montiguous was a diminutive furry creature who happened to miraculously weigh the same as a small asteroid when standing upon one's chest. Tris thought dark matter might be involved. The cat had the general attitude that if given due worship, devotees would be rewarded with a loud purring sub-vocalization called a purr, and the occasional tiny tongue lick. Tris thought both purr and licks were the most wonderful things. He was a particularly big fan of all subvocal rumblings. The Icica of his own species made a similar noise when calming the young. Ellie had actually been hesitant when asking Tris to help with the cat. Not because she didn't trust Tris, but because she thought Mr. Mantiguous might require too much effort. He can be such a bother, Tris love. Tris had bounced on his heels, hair trembling in excitement. It is a profound honor. You will show me everything to do with Mr. Montiguous's maintenance, and I shall be most diligent in his aluminiation. Ellie had looked at him as if he were daft. Tris was accustomed to that from humans. His boss gave him that look nearly half a dozen times a day, but Tris was genuinely thrilled. After all, wasn't this the reason to live among aliens? To experience their foibles, like tiny predators as pets, and honeymoons. Perhaps, when Ellie and Olaf took their third honeymoon, they would let him join them and observe. And I think we're going to leave it there. That's been about 10 minutes of reading. Don't worry if you missed the reading. You can rewind this after the live is posted in about 45 minutes. And otherwise, it will be posted on YouTube probably tomorrow, and you can watch it then. So there it is. That was your little bit of Gail reading. What do you think? You can see why I'm not a great reader, you guys. So you can see why I don't do it very often. Oh, thank you, Frankie. Thank you guys for your support. I remember reading out loud once. So the only time I regularly read out loud is with writing groups. I have one writing group I see once a year. And when I do readings to them, I remember one of the audiophile people saying, You very much know your own voice, don't you? And I was like, I don't know what that exactly means, but okay. Thank you all for your virtual love and claps. Yeah, so that's what it sounds like when Gail does a reading. And yeah, well, you guys seem so supportive. Maybe I'll do it again, but not for the British stuff. I'm not comfortable with that. So that's my reading. If you want to hear me talk, I have a podcast. So if you like my voice in your ears, so right, I make it 3:15, 3:10, something like that. Do we have questions? I'm ready for you. I'm so glad you guys enjoyed that. So that was the fifth gender, and yes, we'll see how this book goes. I hope you love it. Fran, thank you. That was very kind. Oh, somebody said that they got to hear me doing a reading. So if you were at a steampunk event where you heard me doing a reading, that must have been very early on in my career, because I will say that at the beginning of my career, I did do readings, because you're kind of expected to as an author. Someone wants a sample of British Gail. British Gail is me trying to mimic my mother. So when I do a British accent, it's very like toffee front of the mouth, like, darling, how are you? It's very upper crust. And I just don't think I'm particularly good at it, because I sound like an American trying to be British rather than an actual British person. But it is very wet, my British accent, because my mother is from London in the south. And that gives you a specific kind of accent, which is very stuffy. Right, so we're beginning to get some questions. I think we're getting questions. Did I get sick? This is Kate. Oh, I saw Katie at a con. There seems to have been some con crud going around. I did not. One of the reasons that I'm not wearing them now. Instead, I'm wearing an adorable purple manicure. But normally the reason I wear gloves at events, so one of the things it does is it helps me stop getting sick. I also have really freezing cold hands, so it also makes me less uncomfortable shaking people's hands. Melinda wants to know, were there any changes in my writing process shifting to sci-fi? Well, that's an interesting question. If you mean like the process of creating something, yes, because this is one of those books that was entirely unplanned. I am usually a really organized planning writer. I usually have outlines, usually know where I'm going, especially if I'm writing books in series. For this one, none of that was the case. Basically, this character kind of woke me up in the middle of the night, and I just let him go. I was actually, so I wrote this on, I wrote most of this book in the space of 1 week at an intense writing retreat. And, there it is. And yeah, that's not normal. Not a book of list things. I can write a novella in a week if I am doing nothing else at all, if I'm like living and breathing that novella. But this is a book length. I know it looks really slim, but that's because the font is a little bit smaller than in previous books, and that was just an oops, sorry. But because it is almost 65K or something, so it is novel length. It's short, but it's novel length. Anyway, so I just wrote it. It just kind of like poured out of me, and I'm not a pantser as a writer. That's not normal for me. I don't usually just vomit a book out like that. But I did with this one. So to answer your question, Melinda, yeah, it was really different for me because it was just writing. And I guess the reason, so, you know, it's kind of a love story. Most of the love story is sort of closer towards the beginning of the book, although, you know, it threads throughout it. And then most of the mysteries kind of comes in about 2/3 of the way through. So it doesn't have a chassis that's either strictly a mystery, like a cozy mystery, or strictly a romance novel. It's a little bit of a mixture of the two. And that's because I wasn't like following an outline that was dedicated to one or the other. And so I was just kind of letting my instincts go. Unfortunately, you know, this is my 25th book at this juncture. So I have the instincts for pacing in place already. At least I think I do. I hope I do. And nobody, like, I started to get early reviews and stuff, and the one thing no one says about this book is that it's boring, thank heavens, right? So, but yeah, so I feel like, and yes, it is my first mystery, but I did grow up on mysteries. I grew up on watching, my parents are both huge mystery readers and watchers. Like, it's pretty much all my dad at least watches now at all, is European cozy mysteries. That's his bailiwick. That's what he puts on television all the time. And so, like, the mystery element is kind of trained into me. It's trained into my bones, I guess, even though this book is my first mystery. So, but it was different because it was this, like, flow book. So Sonia wants to know, how did I decide how complicated to make the mystery? I didn't do a very complicated one. I think I have an idea for a follow-up for this, which would be another mystery, and it would be Dre investigating another mystery. And that one would be more complicated. So, yeah, I didn't make it very complicated, this mystery. It's just not. It's not really a whodunit. It's not that style. It is more like a cozy, where the point of the book is the inner relationship with characters and character personalities around this murder, rather than the reader and the author in a journey together to figure it out, with lots of clues being dropped. They're just different styles of writing mystery stories, and my instinct is to lean into cozy mysteries, partly because I grew up with them on, like, the BBC and stuff. Like Midsummer Murders and stuff. Like, that's kind of what I instinctively lean towards. So there are a couple of comments about the book. Let's try to keep the comments spoiler free for now, just because the book is literally dropped today, so not everybody has had a chance to read it. People are excited by my purple French manicure. Yes, I get excited by manicures. I was talking with someone recently about what they thought the greatest invention of the modern age was. And I know people will say, like, antibiotics and stuff, but I'm like, a gel manicure. I mean, come on, it changed my life. I love them so much. I know I'm being facetious, but what do you expect? So Book wants to know, so one of the hallmarks of this book, which you can kind of see from the cover here, is that Tristal has emotive hair. So his emotions show in is sort of living hair. And the idea for that came from anemones. I've always loved anemones. I grew up on the coast, and we used to go down, look at tide pools a lot when I was a kid. And as you read the book, this isn't giving anything away, but the thing you'll notice about Galloy and Tristles, or you may or may not notice about it, is a lot of their tech and a lot of their looks and things are kind of influenced by sea creatures. And maybe that's me and my love of octopi again. I love a sort of a tentacular thing. I like noodles. There's a lot of noodle references in this book. But I love, the thing with cats or other animals that have tails is a lot of their emotion is sort of telegraphed through their tails. And I wanted to draw on that idea for Tristel's hair. I like the challenge too. You'll notice when I write books, if there's a werewolf perspective, for example, werewolves will always enter a scene and describe people and things by the smell first and then visual second. Whereas I always have my human characters do visual references first. And it was just really fun to write a character that does hair references first. Like the first thing that reacts is Tristel's hair. And also it's a vehicle for me to show how Dre and as the love interest and Tristel kind of grow together and Dre learns more about him. Is Dre learning how to interpret Tristel's hair. So as the book goes on, you see Dre realize more and more what the different movements of the hair mean. And that's also a way for me as a writer to show them growing together and growing into affection for each other because essentially Dre is learning Tristel's love language by learning how to read his hair. And it was just a really fun. So I don't know where the idea spawned from originally, but I think it was kind of an amalgam of all of those things. So Kevin, you started to ask a question, and I'm really leery about pressing the C more, but let me see if I can do it. Oh, look, there we go. Kevin asks, any further development into Biffy and Lyle romancing the werewolf was their favorite? So you get a little bit more Biffy and Lyle in How to Marry a Werewolf because the Claw and Courtship series, which starts with that book, are all set within, or mostly so far, are going to be set within that pack. So Biffy and Lyle are there, so you get to see them as the alpha and beta of the London pack through the course of those books. I don't have any immediate intentions to write anything more featuring them as the main characters, but you'll definitely see them to the eyes of different pack members as those different pack members get their romances. I'm scrolling through and reading your comments, seeing if anybody has a... Aaron is commenting on my visual of vomiting out a book, which I know is a bit gross, but it does have a sort of purge sensation. Some writers describe this. Some writers, and I would caution anybody who's a beginning writer watching this live, some writers wait for this. Like they won't write a book unless they're just feeling it and they're just pushing it out. And that's the death knell for a career as a writer, if you ask me. You can't wait for it. It's wonderful when it happens. It's so glorious and delightful and easy when a book just spills forth out of you, but let me tell you, it is not common. When it happens, you take advantage of it and you enjoy it and you love it. But if you depend upon that in order to be able to write, you're not going to have a very long-lived career, quite frankly. Or you're going to have a lot of disappointed readers who are constantly waiting for you to write the next book. The biggest skill that I've had to develop as a writer is just sitting down and writing at a computer, whether I am feeling it or not. Yeah, so, I mean, this is a precious, precious darling to me that it was so comfortable and easy and breezy to write. But it is the exception for me, not the rule, that's for sure. Carrie wants to know how many novels I usually have on the go at the same time, or is it just the one? I have tried to write multiple novels at the same time in the past, but it's not something that I can do. So, on the go is a sort of a loose way, but here's how I'll interpret it. When I am writing the rough draft of anything, I am only writing that rough draft. which is why I try to push myself to write it relatively quickly. I'm a big revision person, so as long as it takes me to write something, it's going to take me that long or twice as long to actually edit it and revise it. And part of that is because my creative brain seems only capable of focusing on one major storyline, character, whatever, at the same time. Outline or not. That's just the way it works. Like, that voice and that tone and that style lives in my head for that book, and I need to just write that book. What I can do is break to edit or anything past revision stage on other books, and I will do that. I don't like to do it. I would rather just write something and then switch modes. But what I have been known to do is like do a copy edit pass in the morning and on one book in one series, and then work on the next book in a different series later on in the afternoon as fresh written stuff. I can't write multiple rough drafts at the same time, and I am in profound awe of any authors who can do that. But I usually have multiple books at different stages at the same time. So I'll have a book in production, which means it's going off. I'm dealing with getting, if it's an independent book, I'm getting cover art organized. It's off at a developmental editor. It's off at a copy editor. It's off at the proof pass edit. That sort of thing. There's always one of those going when I'm writing a rough draft of something else, and that's not necessarily multitasking. It's just kind of the nature of being an author, because you've sent something off, it's off your plate, it's started its process of becoming live into the world, and then it's time to write the next thing. So yeah, and so and you'll kind of notice this if you read the Chirp, which is my newsletter. I have a little section in it where it's like, this is what I'm working on, this is what I would really like to be working on, this is what's waking me up in the middle of the night, this is what I'm planning on doing next, so there's a little like, this is what my writing world is like. And then there's a whole like production end of it. This is what's coming out, this is what I'm editing, so there are multiple book activities going on at the same time, but the only thing I'm actually writing is the one thing that I'm usually under deadline for, or is the next book out, or what have you. That's the one. And sometimes a revision pass will come in, and that's something that's like from a developmental editor that requires a lot of focus and concentration from me. And then I either have to delay that revision pass until I'm done with the rough draft, or I have to take a break in the middle of a rough draft in order to work on a revision, because it requires kind of all of my creative juices and energy to do a revision. And that's not great. I don't like breaking in the middle of anything, mostly because it's just really time consuming to pick it back up again. I usually have to reread everything I've written in order to get back into the right mode and stuff. So there can be padded delays as a result of having to take a break. So generally speaking, I try and structure my entire year, forthcoming year, into the next year, as we're now in May, so all the way into May of next year. I kind of try and structure it so that I know I have this sort of large project blocked out on, you are writing this book during this month, or these 2 or 3 months, depending on how much travel I have. And then you are writing this, you're going to revise for these 2 weeks, that kind of thing. I try and plan it all out like that. It doesn't ever, if rarely, stick to that, but I like to sort of know what I'll be working on at any given time. And usually that stretches out a year into the future. Ty is asking about my epiphany. So I've talked about this before. So I often have lots of ideas for books, but I don't actually start writing a book until I've had an epiphany. And that is basically a vivid scene that I see in my head, which is usually 2 characters talking to each other. And that's the moment that I know I can write this book. So for the 5th gender, the scene that popped into my head first is actually maybe the second scene in the book. Oh, sorry for that. That was my cat jumping. It wasn't my fault. And that's the scene where they're at the noodle stand, and the cat is stuck on the roof of the noodle stand, and you first have an encounter. The reader first has an encounter between Tristol and Dre. Those 2 characters already know each other, but it's your first moment of the 2 of them interfacing. And Dre is kind of just wants noodles and kind of comes up, and there's this sort of chaos going on at the noodle stand at the hawker center of the space station. And Drea's like, great, it's the purple alien, the super hot, adorable purple alien again. You know, like, I just got off shift and I really just want noodles, but now I have to rescue a cat. So that was the first scene that sprung into my head. Jocelyn is asking which I like doing more, the sci-fi part of the fifth gender or the romance part of the fifth gender, or presumably the mystery part of the fifth gender, since it's all of those things. That's a really hard question. I would say that I was most comfortable with the romance part, since I've been writing romances now for a couple of years. Like I've been out, I guess, about writing romances. So I really enjoyed that. And I'm also getting to the point, and if you've been with me a while as a reader, you know that I was really nervous about writing sex scenes early on, and one of the reasons I pivoted to write more romances is to get myself comfortable with writing sex scenes. I think it's an important thing for an author to be able to do well. So I challenged myself to do it. I actually loved writing the sex scenes in this book. They were really fun to write. And there are a few. And they are graphic. When I write and publish a book under G.L. Carriger, it means there's some hot stuff in that book. So there's some hot stuff in this book. So I really love that so far. And I love the romance stuff. Like, it was really fun to write a romance between a human and an alien. And maybe that's the sci-fi. Like, I also loved writing the sci-fi. I mean, the gorgeous thing about writing sci-fi, especially with an alien point of view character, is even with a book that's set far in the future, you can use your alien character to make commentary on humanity and on human nature. And, I mean, you can also do that with a character outside of culture. So, you know, you can have an American visit Victorian London and undertake a commentary, as I did with How to Marry a Werewolf. But I don't know, there's something about sci-fi that I really love using it to explore the implications of culture and social structure. And, you know, coming out of an anthropological background, obviously that's something I adore doing. And maybe it's just because I've been trained by early sci-fi, like The Left Hand of Darkness, into thinking of science fiction as a vehicle for that kind of thing, in a way that I just was never trained to look at or think about fantasy or urban fantasy or steampunk in the same way. So I guess that was very exciting for me, and it's one of the reasons I love sci-fi, I think. It's also one of the reasons that I get super hypercritical of early old school, like 1950s and 60s sci-fi, because they were very good at engaging in a dialogue with and discussing the implications of technology and that aspect of human evolution. They were not so great at thinking about social structures and culture and how that might evolve in the future. But that's always what I read for and enjoy in science fiction. And again, that's probably because I'm not a concept-driven writer. I'm a character-driven writer. Like, it's all about the two characters or more interacting with each other that makes something interesting for me to write and interesting for me to read. So I guess if you pin me down, it's the sci-fi aspect that I enjoy the most writing with this book. But they were all tied to each other. I mean, and the mystery was really fun too. I've never done a mystery before, although some people early on described some of the early Parasol Protectorate books as mysteries. But again, that's probably just because I have a childhood raised on a diet of mysteries, and so it leaks in. The mystery beats and the pulse of a mystery, even if you don't actually have one, feel like it leaks into my stuff because I had so much of it as a kid or growing up in general. Aileen is complimenting me for dressing to match the cover. Yes, I always try to do that. There it is. It's me. I'm wearing an Ishakti dress. You can't really tell, but it is a dress. Trust me. That I recently got. It has pockets and little puffy shoulders because that's what I do. So we've done my epiphany moment with this book. Happy 25 books. Thank you very much. Oof, who knew? Jan wants more books in this universe. So the fifth gender is in a pre-existing universe. The universe is also shared with the sci-fi young adult book that I wrote, which only exists as an audio production, a full-class audio book called Crud Rat. Crud Rat is a 2-part book that someday I will write the rest of it. I promise, someday. And then I will also publish it at that juncture so that you guys can read it because, right, I'm an author. You do want to read it. It's in the same universe as Fifth Gender, but only loosely. There's very little crossover in terms of like alien cultures or anything. This takes place in a completely different part of the universe from the other, but it does share my conceit on the creation of this universe, which is how humans colonize and stuff. And that's why it's called the Tinkered Stars universe. And I'm not going to really talk about that because it's an endemic plot point in the young adult series that's in this universe. But that is the sort of historical background of how the universe, the sci-fi universe came to be, is the only sort of shared plot point. So, yeah. Will I do more? Yes. I intend to someday, hopefully not too far away, I intend to revamp and then publish Crud Rat and its follow-up book, which is called Cipher. I just haven't had the time or the bandwidth. And that book has a very strong voice that is very different from my normal style of writing. So I really would have to clear the schedule to write it and produce it. And honestly, it depends on the success of this one. So like if my readers and if people are not interested in the way I write when I write science fiction, then there's not a lot of point in me pursuing that side of my career. There's always an exception in terms of like, if I feel moved by it and I really want to write it, I'm going to write it regardless of what the market cares about. But this is my living, so I do have to think about it. And so this is kind of a test book baby to see, do people like Gail when Gail writes sci-fi, basically. And we'll see. We'll see how it goes. They might hate it. They might hate my style when I write in space. Oh. Gail is complimenting my pacing. Thank you very much. That is the upside of writing like multiple different genres in one book, is you can draw on different aspects to improve your pacing. So like you, as a writer, I can put in a bit of a sci-fi moment, you know, like invading spaceship or what have you, and that is a pacing plot point. Then I can put in a romantic moment, like first kiss, and that is a pacing plot point. And then I can put in a mystery moment, like the discovery of the body, and that is a pacing plot point. So when you are someone like me who often chooses to write in multiple genres, it's also a really good tool for pacing. On the flip side, it makes it really hard to sell to a publisher because they're like, we don't know where we would shelve this. We don't know how to promote it. But from a toolbox kit as a writer perspective, it's actually really fun because it assists you in your pacing, at least. I hope it does. Michelle says that they heard me read at Huntington Beach years ago. That would have been the first time I did a book tour. So that would be way back in 2010 for Changeless or Blameless, probably. Yeah, that was a very long time ago, 9 years. This is my 10th year as an author, you guys. It's crazy to think about. Libby wants to know what are some of the cozies that my dad watched back in the day. So on TV. So there used to be on one night, and this dates me, but on one night, maybe Thursdays or something, one of the local channels here in Northern California, Channel 9, which was the PBS channel, would switch over to all BBC Mysteries. And I'm thinking Inspector Morse. There were some Miss Marple adaptations, probably Sherlock Holmes, although not as common. Yeah, stuff like that. And like Midsummer Murders. Recently, things like Grantchester have crossed my path. There's that funny one, which was literally funny because it was 2 stand-up comics in the titular roles. One of them lived in a windmill, like lived in the house beneath a windmill. And the woman who was sort of a private investigator or something. I can't, like I said, I'm not articulating properly. But that kind of vein. I loved the series, which I cannot remember, but Mrs. Bouquet, the actress who played her, and Dominic Monaghan, who went on to play a Hobbit in Lord of the Rings, they were in this funny little cozy mystery, which was kind of a British housewife. I really like that oeuvre of like British housewife becomes investigator. That always makes me happy. The Miss Marple oeuvre, I guess it would be. It brings the coziness into cozy for me. I like ladies who knit, like solving murders. I guess that's, if I'm gonna watch a mystery, that is the mystery I want to watch. Ladies who knit and sip tea, solving murders. That makes me happy. In, like, the idyllic British countryside. There are a couple of nice compliments about fifth gender cheering people up and making them feel better, and I am so glad about that. That's what I really wanted to do. Yeah, I think there is a little bit of commentary on society and gender norms and conflating gender with expectations of the human anatomy. But it also is meant to make you happy. And even though there's a murder in there, it should leave you just contented and satisfied and smiling. Like all of my books do. Like, I write book hugs. That's what I do. So hopefully this one will do that for you. Make you just feel better. So if you're in a slump, I promise there's nothing too gritty or traumatic about this book. It's gonna just make you feel better. Katie wants to know what a cozy mystery actually means. So a cozy mystery for me, and I know there's probably the Mystery Society, and I'm not, like I said, not a mystery writer or even reader, mostly just a mystery watcher when I watch them. Cozy mysteries are mysteries that come out of the Agatha Christie oeuvre, as opposed to, say, suspense, or police procedural, or noir, which are all other kinds of mysteries. And cozies generally involve a small town, so which for writers means a prescribed number of people already in existing relationships with one another, and an investigator who is part of that small town community. And then usually a companion. So there's the primary investigator, and then there's a foil character who goes with the primary. And so that can be, if it's a policeman, that can be a deputy. If it's a investigator, it can be the investigator or the PI or the attaché, and then it can be like their best friend or an associate or an expert, like a coroner expert or something like that. And the guarantee with a cozy mystery that for the reader, the like contractual guarantee that so that betrayal doesn't occur, so reader betrayal doesn't occur, is that everything will be solved through the course of this one book or this one show. Everything will be all right. Like, we'll find out who did it. The bad guy will get their comeuppance. Nothing is going to be too gross. Nothing's going to be too violent. It's going to be kind of comforting and comfortable. And generally speaking, a larger group of people is brought together at the end of the cozy to solve the mystery or to have the solution presented to them. And you can think of classic Agatha Christie, where I have brought you all together today because one of you is a murderer. And so one of the reasons that I had this sort of set on both, first the murder occurs on a spaceship and then on a space station, is because it gives the cozy impression of a prescribed small town, essentially. It's just in space. So that's one of the reasons I describe this as a cozy. Also, cozies are, by their nature, very character-driven. So they actually share they're often the heroine's journey, and they share quite a bit with romances often. There's often a romance thread as a result of this, at least in modern cozies. And that also has to do with the nature of the cozy being dialogue driven when you're writing it, and being all about the interpersonal relationships of the people within this community. And as a dialogue driven writer already, that's very comfortable. And romance is often sort of dialogue and obviously relationship driven. So that's why it's kind of comfortable for people to transition between these two. Nora Roberts, for example, writes both. As opposed to something like a police procedural or a noir or a suspense thriller, where it's often more like on the trail of a serial killer. They're often much darker, much grittier. Yes, there will be dialogue and things like that, but it's less driven by these interpersonal relationships than it is by this sort of one person, the investigator or the PI, going after this other person, the bad guy. And that's a kind of a different dynamic to write. And so I'm just more comfortable leaning into a cozy. And that's the way I define it as different and the way I think about it differently. And I'm not sure that's like the technical definition, but it's kind of just from a writerly perspective. Like the notes and things I would think about writing when I'm writing a cozy are very different from if I were going to write something like, like a Jack Reacher novel or Dan Simmons novel, one of those. And part of that is like cozies owe a lot of their chassis to the heroine's journey, and crime thrillers and suspense and procedurals owe a lot of their chassis to the heroes. Now, the police procedurals that you see on television now, like Law and Order and stuff, they definitely have a cozy aspect to them because you end up very involved in the lives of the whole team that is investigating. And then they also start to lean into caper. So you start to get this idea, which I do with the Custard Protocol book. So you start to get this idea that one person alone can't solve it. You need all these other assisted elements, like CSI does this as well, where you have to go to this expert and this expert and this expert. And that takes us back towards a kind of heroine's journey idea where you're using, your main character becomes a general who's delegating and good at identifying who's good. And a long-running series like Law and Order in particular, or SVU, Law and Order SVU, will become almost more about the interpersonal relationships between the investigators than it does the actual crime that's being solved. That's kind of an incidental to us as viewers or readers learning more about the team. So the mystery genre is very interesting to me, and how it's evolved over the years is very interesting to me, even though I'm not a huge consumer of it. People are excited about reading the new book. That's nice. Well, this is the thing about the lives, is one of the things you learn about me on these lives is how, like, much thought I put into this sort of stuff. Possibly too much. I mean, I'm a passionate, like, reader and reader more than I am a watcher of all of these different genres and tropes, and I'm just very interested in it and how they function and how it works as a writer. It's the scientific brain, I suppose. But it means when you ask what seems like a simple question, I've actually probably thought far too much about it. Sarah wants to know if I'll do a hardcover version of this. Very unlikely. Unless there's more in the series, I suppose I could do an omnibus or something. Yeah, hardcover is... So this is independently produced. I produced it myself. I of course, hired editors and a cover art designer and all that sort of stuff. But essentially, it's mine. It doesn't have a publisher, a New York publisher behind it. And it's just really hard to do hardcover under those circumstances. I could do a hardcover through a middleman called Ingram, but it's really prohibitively expensive for an independent author. I mean, these are already, frankly, like, ridiculously expensive for me to produce. And I make very, very little off of a print edition, I'm afraid to say. I do print editions because I have readers who really like to read in print. Otherwise, like, fiscally, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I will make my money back eventually on a print edition, but that's about it. They're honestly not particularly profitable. And I can't imagine that a hardcover would be at all. I mean, who knows? I could be talking on clouds, right? Like, this book could do really, really well, and everybody wants a hardcover. I do know that hardcover is more common in science fiction. But yeah, to do one yourself is just really difficult. But if we're really lucky, maybe there'll be more, and maybe I'll have somebody want to do an omnibus version. There are some funny comments about cozy mysteries going on in the feed. Oh, Rosemary and Thyme. That is a good cozy. Yes, I saw those. Chris wants to know where the 5-gender concept came from. Oh, that was from the very beginning. Yeah, and it has a weird origin, which would actually be a spoiler for the book, so I can't really talk about it. But Chris, that is a question to ask maybe in a later live in a couple of months after people have had an opportunity to read the book, because I think the answer is really interesting, but it is a huge spoiler. But yeah, I did from the very get-go have this idea of 5 genders and multiple genders, because I kind of wanted to write an alien race that were sort of the platypuses of the galaxy, like just very confusing. And people were like, why are you so complicated? Why is procreation so complicated for you? Yeah, so I did have that from the very beginning. Some very nice comments and compliments. Thank you, everybody. Emotive hair, very fun. Yes, it was so much fun to write. So we're nearing into the last 10 minutes or so of the live. So if you could stop asking questions, that would be awesome. Don't worry, there will be another live, I promise. I try to do a live every month. Unfortunately, they are always on Saturdays, because I usually have some other event on a Saturday that I'm dressed up for, and then I come here and do this. This was special because it was a launch day, but usually there's something else. Everybody's excited by purple. Purple is great. Thank you for the compliments on purple being a good color for me. I don't think of it as my color, possibly because it was a color that I got a little super saturated with in the 80s, shall we say. And so it's like pink was first. Took me a while to come around to pink, and now I'm coming around to purple. Unfortunately, there just isn't a lot of purple on offer at the moment, so... and lavender, yes, lavender, please, as Tris would say. I don't have any lavender in my wardrobe. Will we see... Oh, Soap and Sophronia. The Soap and Sophronia question. We get this one a lot. Yes, you see more of Soap and Sophronia. You will see Soap and Sophronia, or you will see Sophronia early this year, and then you will see Soap and Sophronia this year. Not as main characters, just as side characters. I have no intention of writing them as main characters. Again, sorry. Maybe. Anything's possible. It's unlikely. But you'll definitely see them. They're, in the background, fussing and messing up everybody's lives. Or not messing them up. Yours to decide. Book wants to know whether it was hard for me to decide and keep up with all 5 different genders. No, actually. Yeah, I don't... they seem perfectly logical to me. It wasn't until I handed this off to my dev editor, and my dev editor was like, you gotta write them all down in the back. So for those of you who get this book, there is a glossary section at the back where I go through all the different alien terms. See? Let me see if I can... Oh, there it is. Glossary of alien terms. And that's just because it makes perfect sense to me in my brain. My brain has them all laid out and knows how they interact with each other and how they function in the alien society. But my development letter was like, Gail, dear, please, please just lay it out. I was like, okay. I'm like that when I write high fantasy as well. Like I come up with these incredibly complicated magical systems that make perfect sense to me. And I do write it all down and keep track of it, but they seem all logical and they'll have Latin words for everything. And it just gets so overly complicated. And usually whoever my editor is like, rein it in. But yeah. Sorry for the pause. Moving along. I'm so glad. Sally says that she loves the aliens in my books. She's one of the lucky ones who I think read Crudrat. Some of the early Kickstarter backers of that book, they actually got a physical version of it. And yeah, that's I love writing aliens. I really do. It's a portal fantasy. Portal fantasy is a means by which fish out of water can be explored as authors. So you can have somebody who doesn't belong in a culture or alien planet or what have you, and then, play with the trope of understanding a different place and time by, time travel does this as well. Yeah, it's really fun to write because you don't have to figure out how to info dump. This is part of my, but also because you can do a social commentary. Robert wants to know, what is it about writing retreats that help me write so quickly? It's a really good question. I think a huge part for me is complete lack of distractions. I mean, my office helps with that, but in general, just having no distractions. There's nothing else I can do because I fly and then take a public transport to get to wherever I'm going. I am literally trapped. I cannot go anywhere. So that is immensely helpful. Also, like, I'm going to secretly confess this, I'm kind of a competitive writer. And so just sitting at a table with other people, all of us trying to get as many words on the page as possible, and then kind of looking up and like they're all still writing and I'm like, okay, I got to keep writing. Or, at the end of the day being like, how many words did you do? That is that's just helpful to me it's part of my personality, competitiveness. And part of it is also that I'm excuse me for the shaking. That is my cat. Competitiveness. Where was I going with this? Oh, these writing retreats I do are not all writers at the same career point as me. There are newer writers, there are more established writers, there are memoirists. There's all sorts of a mix-up of different kinds of writers on these retreats. And I think, part of it is that environment of... I'm one of the only ones who is a full-time writer. It's what I do. It's how I make my living. And I kind of feel bound to prove myself, to be like, I exercise this muscle all the time. Here's how much you can do. Here's what you can do if you get to be lucky enough to do this as your life's work. And so I feel also like I have something to prove. And maybe that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's certainly a helpful thing for productivity. So whether it's good or bad, it's useful. And that's what's important to me. So then those are all the reasons that I find retreats so incredibly valuable. And I'm always, like you'll see, I'm always looking for more. I'm always going on as many as possible. Like my retreat every year in the spring, that is a week long. I've been there, 4 or 5 years now. Like that is sacred. I don't plan anything. I never have a book come out. Like if I'm signing a contract with the traditional publisher, I tell them like, that time is off limits. Like I am off grid and you cannot, there's no reason on earth why that time should be disturbed for me anyway. And I'm just hugely protective of it because it works so well for me. So those are some of the reasons I think it works. But there's also a part of me that's like, I don't really need to know how it works or why it works. I just need to know that it does and arrange my life and travel schedule in such a way that I get as many writing retreats as possible in. They're so valuable to me. People are discussing what they're drinking and whether they like sci-fi or not. So I'm really hoping that even if you don't like sci-fi, you might give this book a try because it does have the mystery and the romance element. So maybe it will be the exception to that rule. I do understand it because it actually, as a reader, it took me a really long time to come around to sci-fi. I mostly read fantasy when I was younger. And just partly was that when I was young, it's a long time ago, there wasn't a lot of sci-fi that had female protagonists or explored, different aspects of culture. Like I said, I enjoy in the same way that fantasy did. And so that I didn't feel like there was sci-fi for me to read. That has changed. And then the other side of it was, of course, there was also a lot of sci-fi gets really, really dark and depressing. And obviously that's not something I read. It's also not something I write. Any last questions? It looks like if I haven't gotten to your question, I'm really sorry. I'll come back and go back to the feed and I'll comment individually if I didn't get the question. Kevin wants to finish this up with what I'm using for eye makeup. It's lovely. Okay, so I'll put a link in later, but the product I use is called a Vamp Stamp and I highly recommend it. It basically just gives you a rider for cat eyes. It's like a little stamp that you dip into liquid eye makeup and then you go boop, boop on each eye and it helps you get the same length and the same curve when you're doing a cat eye. And then I use a liquid liner always, and not with the paintbrush, a pen liner. It looks like a felt tip pen. And yeah, that is how I get eye makeup on now. Man, I do not miss the days of the paintbrush liquid liner or the kohl eyeliner, which smudged everywhere. But thank you, Kevin. I very much appreciate the question. Fran has asked that I consulted a number of people for this book. And did anyone have particularly useful advice for my writing process? Ooh, that's a good question. Not for the writing process. I think I'm just very comfortable with the writing process now. So that wasn't my consults were all what I call delicacy readers or secondary beta readers from within the queer community, just to make sure that, since I'm dealing with a delicate subject to modern audiences, which is gender presentation, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to offend anyone, while still staying true to the story. But and I'm not going to name names or call anybody out, because they didn't agree to that. I like to keep everybody's privacy. But so that was mostly what I just asked them to make sure that I wasn't pissing them off, pretty much, or stepping on toes. We have a question about the cover from book, which is, where did I get this picture? This is a picture of a dancer, a ballet dancer, that I found on stock art. So, yeah, I was really excited about it. It's like, oh, it's perfect. The actual cover process was much more complicated from that, and maybe I will go into that at another time. But when I found that final image, I was like, oh, this will work perfectly. And this is actually, Starla, my cover art designer, went and found a sea anemone and adapted that photo of a sea anemone to be Tristal's hair. Partly because that's how I describe it in the text, but we were talking back and forth about how to get the right kind of look for his hair. Ty wants to know, what character voices can I fall into without having to work for it? So Lord Akaldama, obviously, is really easy for me to write. That's one of the reasons that he has the advice column in my blog, because I can slip in and out of his voice really comfortably. I think that has to do with my childhood and all of my my drag queen aunties growing up in San Francisco. Partly. So it's those voices. They're just there in my head. Triss was actually an incredibly easy voice to drop into. Because he's so kind of excitable and enthusiastic, and I got to tap into kind of, not the Ivy, but the Ivy-ish nature of my personality, which is this sort of childish wonder, which I've worked hard. I can be quite pessimistic and jaded, but I've worked really hard to kind of develop that, and it comes out of me particularly with books I love and with food that I've discovered and loved. I still have that enthusiasm and excitement. And I don't want to ever lose that about myself as a person. So tapping into that to write Triss was actually really fun and easy to do because it's there. And I guess that's the point with voice for me, especially with a main character's point of view voice. If I identify with them, or if an aspect of my personality identifies with them really closely, I find them easier to write. Or my history. If there's too different for me, it's a little bit more of a struggle for me to write. Or if they're a part of me or share a part of me from very far in the past, I find it a little bit harder. Elizabeth wants to know, any hints about what I'm working on now or next? Sure, why don't we end with that, actually? So anybody who has questions after Elizabeth, I'm sorry, I will get back to you in the comments, or if you want, you can save them up for the next live. So what I'm working on right now, actually, is I am writing a nonfiction book about the heroine's journey for authors. It's specifically designed as a kind of guide to the heroine's journey as represented in mythology, and what those beats are from a storyteller and narrative point of view, much as the patterns of withdrawal and return that Campbell talks about in The Hero's Journey. There's a different set, and they mean different things for the heroine's journey. And so it's something that I studied way back in college, and I kind of assumed everybody knew about, in the same way that I assumed everybody knows about the hero's journey. And it turns out people really don't. and writers really don't. And writers use the hero's journey a lot. They use it as a crutch. They use it to justify liking or disliking books. And the hero's journey is used just as frequently, and it's just as commonly out there, but people don't realize it, and they don't know or understand that there's a whole other structure going on that we draw on for romance novels, for cozy mysteries, for a lot of different subgenres. So I finally people kept asking me, I would mention it like in a live, or I would mention the Heroines journey on a panel at a Comic-Con, or I would talk about it on book tour, and inevitably people would come up to me and say, where's the book on this? Where's something I can read about this? And I waited, and it hasn't been written. There are Jungian Heroines journey analyzed out there, which I have a lot of problems with that kind of theology. So that's a no for me too. And finally I was like, well, I can't point anyone at this book, so clearly I'm supposed to write this book. So I'm taking the next kind of month and a half, 2 months, I think it will take me to turn a teaching presentation deck that I've been giving for about a year now into a nonfiction book. Blah. Isn't that scary? So that's what I'm working on right now. In the hopper, in terms of fiction, I have the second Delightfully Deadly book coming. So that series is the spin-off series of assassins as adults growing up. And you had Poison or Protect a couple of years ago, and the second one in that series is coming out. I don't really have a title for it yet. I'm still nursing the title, but the book itself, the rough draft is written, and it'll come out in the spring of next year. So that'll be your next big read from me in the Parasol Protectorate universe. And I will tell you whose book it is and everything in a forthcoming Cheer-Up. That's my newsletter, so if you want to know those sorts of things right away and first, that's where you get them. And then meanwhile, before that, in terms of releases, the final Custard Protocol book, Reticence, is coming out in August. That's Percy's book, and I think you will really like it. There's a new character love interest for him who I hope you guys love. I think she's awesome. And then, of course, The Meet Cute is coming out as part of the Omnibus Collection fan service in October. That is sold out. The Meet Cute is the short story that details the hedgehog incident from the Parasol Protectorate, which is when Alexia and Connell first meet. But I will release that short story eventually, also as audio and as digital. So, again, keep an eye to the Cheer-Up for that, and I'll let you know when that happens and when I decide to release it. But those will probably also be next year. I might let the audiobook go a little earlier. It might be a Christmas present for everybody. It's just a short story, so it's like a wee audio, but that's the plan. Anyway, so that's what I have in the hopper. In terms of what I'm writing next, probably the third San Andreas Shifter book, which is the Enforcer Enigma. I think that's the thing I will write next. It's on the docket. I have a new young adult series out on proposal right now, and if that gets picked up, it will rearrange what I will be writing and working on next. But it won't rearrange the production schedule of what you guys will be getting. So you will still be getting Reticence, fan service featuring the Meet Cute, and the second Delightfully Deadly book. Those are the things you're getting next. So, yay! And on that note, I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your weekend, and I will see you here again for another live in the future, and maybe next time I'll do what I promised this time around, which I will explain how the book production process works from an independent perspective. So the previous live, which you can check out on my YouTube channel, has what the traditional publishing process is like. And this one you got a reading. So please do let me know if you enjoyed the reading. I am open to doing it again if you guys liked it. So leave a comment letting me know if you're into it. Yeah, because I will do it, but only if you like it. And on that note, please check out the new book, My Little Book Baby. I'm so in love with this little book. And yeah, stay smiling. I love you. Take care of yourselves.